Hey there, Photo Universe. All right, we're gonna call this photography in the real world, and it's kind of a philosophical video, a little bit on some of my thoughts on photography. And this comes about because somebody asked a question. They took a bunch of photographs with their K5, Pentax K5 in the snow, and they all turned out gray. Well, I mean, that's kind of exemplifies some of the things about photography that are interesting. Everybody thinks that photography is this big science, and photography attracts a lot of scientific, technical type people. By the way, this is a portfolio I threw together. It's an Itoyo Profolio. You get these at art stores, and you can slip your name in there, and you print out some pictures, and you put them in there, and you end up with a nice little quick portfolio. So here's some landscape work I did. Anyway, so here's the interesting thing about photography. Okay, photography is somewhat scientifically based. I mean, obviously, it's all scientifically based. You got f-stops, you got numbers, you got shutter speeds, ISOs, all these sliding scales, heavy-duty technology in terms of sensors and shutters and battery, all this stuff. Okay, it's all technical. But you know what? Where the rubber meets the road is artistic. You have to have the vision. Okay, so now if you're painting, there's not a lot of technology involved, right? So you get some paints and you get a canvas, and then you take your paints and I guess there's like techniques involved, and if you're mixing your own paints, maybe you need to know chemistry, right? But it's not very scientifically oriented. Okay, you get your paints, you squirt them out, you paint, and then it's mostly artistic, right? You need to be able to take the brushes and to paint on the put the paint on the canvas in such a way. And I'm sure there's all kinds of scientific techniques, but most painters don't approach it that way, right? Most painters, when you get two painters together and they're discussing painting, they don't talk about, the different brushes they're using. Not too often, I wouldn't think. I don't know, I'm not a painter. But photographers tend to talk mostly about photography gear and not so much about photographs, which is an interesting thing. I think it's because a lot of technical people are attracted to photography. But ironically, photography is one of those things where when you analyze it a little bit, it's like flying. Okay? It's like sailing. All right? So it's got two aspects to it. It's got the science part and it's got the artistic part, and you have to be able to think scientifically and switch over really quickly to this artistic part. And then you have to apply the scientific elements in a quick manner to produce artistic results. Okay? Guess what? Flying's the same way. You got to take all those numbers. I mean, pilots, photographers, and sailors. Those are three human activities that tend to run together. Photographers tend to be pilots, and they tend to be sailors. Okay? I am. Okay? I'm a commercial pilot. I've flown for airlines. Back in the day, that was one of my side notes. When I burned out on photography, I decided to become an airline pilot. That was clever. Right before 9/11. Anyway, be that as it may, I've also had sailboats. Okay, so let's talk about sailing, right? You've got the science of sailing, which is, you've got to pick a certain sail. You've got to trim it properly. But the actual act of sailing is an art. Okay? Well, guess what? You got, photography is the same way. You pick your camera, you pick your lenses. The actual act of doing photography, of creating art, is an art. Right? So photography is the same way. Okay, so let's talk about exposure in the snow. Right? So the technical people want to think, like when I was talking about normal lenses, right? So the normal lens is anywhere from 28 to 45. Well, it's a range. That freaks people out. Technical people want to know that a normal lens is a 35. That's it. It can't be a 28. It can't be a 45. Well, you know what? It can be a 45. If you have it's a range. And so it's approximations. Technical people hate approximations, although calculus is based on approximations. Okay, they're just very, very accurate approximations. All right, so the artistic side, you got to let it slide a little bit, right? You gotta. Some things you can't let slide, but other things you need. You got to hone it in to a certain extent, and then you need to let it slide. So you need to be scientific enough to understand your exposure, your ISO, your aperture, your shutter speeds. Okay, your aperture, your shutter speeds, and your ISOs are all make your exposure. Okay, but you have to be able to, once you hone that in, you need to let it slide. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, okay, you're out taking photographs of the snow, right? Your meter is going to give you, that was the cover of a book, Hidden Portland. Okay, I had that up on a stock agency. Somebody picked it up. There's a book called Hidden Portland, and that made the cover. So anyway, so your camera, the meter in your camera is going to make everything 18% gray. That's just what it does. So it's going to get you close. If you're at 18% gray, you're either a little bit under or a little bit over or right on. Okay, so you're taking pictures of snow. Well, snow is white. You want your snow to look white? Well, your meter is going to make it gray. Give it a couple of stops of exposure compensation plus. Overexpose a couple of stops. That's the answer. That's the secret. Okay, if you're shooting in program mode, exposure compensation, dial it in. 2 stops, 3 stops. If your snow is gray and you dial in 3 stops of exposure compensation positive, you're going to have white snow. I mean, but you know, it isn't film, so look at the screen. Okay? Look at the screen. If you take a picture and your screen is giving you gray snow, dial in some exposure compensation. If you know, okay, you take a picture, right? You take a photograph, you look at the screen, you say to yourself, too light or too dark. If it's too dark, give it some positive exposure compensation. If it's too light, give it some negative exposure compensation. Experiment. Be artistic. Artistic people like to slide things around. So that's what we're talking about. Now we're getting into some wedding stuff. So anyway. So there it is. Okay? So that's photography in the real world. Those are my thoughts on the artistic and it's balancing the artistic and the scientific aspects. By the way, photographers, pilots, and sailors, what they have in common is that their cerebral cortex tends to be faster than everyone else's. In other words, the part of the brain that links the right side and left side, you can flip back and forth quicker. And that's what makes them good pilots, photographers, and sailors, because they can go to the scientific brain and get the information they need to go to the artistic side and use that information, put the two together real quick. That's why photography, flying, and sailing appeals to these people. Just one of the reasons. Now, you don't have to be that kind of person to be a good photographer, but I'm just saying that's what scientists have discovered. All right. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Google it. Look it up. You know, if you don't think I'm right, Google it, check it out, see what you find out. These are just my impressions. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I think it's interesting, and so I'm trying to open up the discussion, kind of, get you thinking about stuff. So anyway, that's Ed with Photo Universe. Have a good one. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Bye.